The Experiment. At the beginning of Overlord, the movie makes it clear that the mission went very wrong. The story takes place on D-Day and follows a group of American paratroopers who end up separated from the rest of the platoon during the invasion of Normandy. Lost in enemy territory, they discover that the Nazis were carrying out secret experiments in an isolated village, using human test subjects to create nearly immortal soldiers. The result is reanimated bodies, violent and completely out of control. In the middle of the chaos, one of the most important soldiers in the group, Chase, gets shot and is apparently killed. With the team cornered and out of options, his companions make a desperate decision. They inject Chase with the same experimental serum used in the Nazi tests, believing it might bring him back so he can keep fighting. The idea works for a few seconds, but the price is absurd. Chase wakes up violently, already showing that something is very wrong. His body starts reacting to the substance in a grotesque way. Muscles expand, bones twist, and in one of the most shocking moments of the movie.
Chase.
Unlike other zombie transformations, this one is fast, brutal, and completely unexpected. Deadly Seduction. Cheap parties and a camera turned on Kickoff VHS Amateur Night, an anthology that no one really knew where it was going until the first segment began. The film follows a group of obnoxious guys who take two women to a hotel room with the intention of recording everything. Among them is a strange young woman, way too quiet, always distant, silently watching while almost childishly repeating that she likes one of them. This seemingly shy figure stands out precisely because she doesn't fit the environment. While the others act with arrogance and overconfidence, she shows an obsessive interest in a single guy. When the two are left alone, the situation seems to follow a predictable path, but the feeling of discomfort never goes away. Something about her is clearly not right. The turn happens when the other men try to get involved. The change is immediate and brutal. The woman stops being passive and becomes extremely violent. Her features begin to change, her teeth turn into sharp fangs, and this happens. What looked like a potential victim reveals herself as the real threat in the room. When the situation already seems to have reached its limit, the film delivers the final shock. After massacring the men, she grows wings in front of the camera, revealing her true supernatural nature. She's not just an aggressive creature, but an entity that seduces, destroys, and disappears without leaving any explanations. The Strange Woman. Cameras running all the time and a constant feeling of discomfort define the taking of Deborah Logan. Deborah is an elderly woman diagnosed with Alzheimer's who agrees to take part in a college project meant to document the progression of the disease. The crew moves into the house, follows simple routines, memory lapses, and strange behaviors that at first seem like natural symptoms of the condition. As time goes on, things start to get strange. Deborah has increasingly aggressive episodes, speaks nonsense phrases, and shows a strength that doesn't match her age or appearance. So the question comes up, is this some progression of Alzheimer's, or is there something worse behind these behaviors? Well, the answer shows up when it becomes clear that Deborah isn't just sick. She's being used as a vessel for an ancient ritual tied to a demonic entity. The entity was the spirit of Henri Desjardins, an occultist doctor who practiced rituals linked to indigenous peoples. He sought immortality through ritual sacrifices of young girls, and after being killed by Deborah to save her own daughter, began to exist as a parasitic demonic presence. Over time, Desjardins' spirit started taking over her body, using Alzheimer's as a way to weaken her mind and gain control. The most shocking transformation happens completely out of nowhere. In a quick and brutal moment, Deborah opens her mouth in an unnatural way. The scene lasts only a few seconds, but it changes everything. What once seemed like sadness and confusion is reinterpreted as signs of possession. Running zombie. Right away, World War Z presents a simple but terrifying idea. What if zombies weren't slow, clumsy, and predictable, but fast, aggressive, and almost unstoppable? The story follows Jerry Lane, a former UN investigator who is thrown into the middle of a global collapse when an unknown infection starts turning people into violent creatures in a matter of seconds. There's no long bite or drawn-out suspense. The human body becomes an out-of-control weapon almost instantly. One of the most striking transformations happens when a character is infected right in front of everyone during the opening invasion scene. The young man's body starts twisting unnaturally. Bones crack, posture changes, and his gaze completely disappears. In just a few seconds, that person ceases to exist.
2, 5, 6, 8, 7.
The transformation is dry, brutal, and extremely fast, which only heightens the sense of desperation. The impact is clear on Jerry's face as he instantly understands that the world has just entered a totally different level of threat. Youth collected. The substance follows Elizabeth, a declining movie star who is fired from her aerobics show when she turns 50 for being considered too old. In a world that practically discards anyone who ages, she agrees to use an experimental drug capable of reversing aging, giving birth to Sue, her young, desirable, and socially accepted version. But this exchange doesn't come as a simple, nice-looking before and after. The first transformation, when Sue appears and Elizabeth disappears, is anything but comfortable. The process is painful, physical, and grotesque, making it clear that that young body wasn't born naturally. The aesthetic resembles surreal trips, with a sequence that directly references 2001, a space odyssey, creating an almost hypnotic atmosphere as the character's identity fragments. But the real shock comes later. Sue needs to keep using the substance to maintain her perfect form. When she runs out of the drug, the body demands its price. The final transformation is brutal. Sue deteriorates rapidly and becomes an aged, distorted, almost monstrous creature.
Hey!
It's not just a physical change, it's the materialization of the fear of losing value. In the end, the body explodes, and Elizabeth's original face crawls toward her star on the Walk of Fame. Little Georgie. In it, Bill, Denbrough, and the Losers Club descend into the sewers of Derry to face the evil that has been terrorizing the town. Bill is the leader of the group and carries enormous guilt over the death of his younger brother, Georgie. For Bill, this journey isn't just about facing a monster, but about confronting the pain he never managed to overcome. As they walk through the dark, suffocating tunnels, Bill ends up drifting away from his friends and encounters something terrifying. Georgie appears there, whole, smiling, and calling out to his older brother. The boy seems confused, says he got scared, and just wants to go home. The dialogue is delicate, full of guilt, longing, and regret, but something starts to sound off. Georgie speaks in a strange way. Bill notices small details that don't line up with reality. In a dry and brutal moment, Bill shoots the boy in the head. And here we see the character's evolution in the movie. Even though it's painful, he understands that this isn't Georgie. The body falls to the ground and starts twisting unnaturally. What was there wasn't a lost child, but Pennywise revealing his true monstrous form and making it clear that he uses fear and emotional pain as weapons. The Possessed Daughter. The opening of Evil Dead throws the viewer straight into a nightmare. In the middle of a dark, silent forest, a young woman appears running, covered in blood, desperate, trying to escape from something that isn't fully shown. We don't know who's chasing her, we only feel the absolute panic on her face. The escape doesn't last long. She's captured, restrained, and forcibly taken to the basement of an isolated cabin. Down there, the atmosphere is even more suffocating. The girl faces a group of people standing still, watching in silence. Among them is an elderly woman murmuring chants while reading from an ancient book. The cruelest detail is the presence of Harold, the girl's own father. She begs, cries, says she killed her mother by accident, and asks for forgiveness. Hope of being saved appears when she calls out to her father, searching for any trace of love. But he knows there's something wrong with this girl, so he lights a match to start the fire. At that moment, the mask drops. The girl changes completely. Her eyes turn yellow, her face twists, and her voice is no longer human.
I will kill you like I killed your mom!
The transformation makes it clear that something demonic has taken over her. Convinced that there's no salvation, Harold makes the most extreme decision possible. He pours gasoline over his own daughter and sets her on fire. To end the ritual and her suffering, he fires a shotgun into her head, telling her that he loves her.
I love you, baby.
The Werewolf. In An American Werewolf in London, David Kessler is a young American who is traveling through England when he's attacked by a creature during a full moon. He survives, but carries a curse that only fully reveals itself later, when he's alone in the apartment of the nurse who took him in after the attack. The transformation begins in a silent and agonizing way. David feels an unbearable pain in his head, as if something is trying to break out from inside him. His skin starts to burn and he rips off his own clothes, pacing around the apartment in panic, trying to understand what's happening to his body. Unlike more recent films, there are no quick cuts or shadows hiding the process here. The camera moves in close on his hands and feet. Fingers begin to stretch, bones shift and snap, joints reorganize themselves in a terrifying way. Claws slowly emerge as David screams in pain, fully aware of every single change. The suffering is physical, brutal, and prolonged. Fur grows rapidly, covering his skin as the human structure disappears. The peak comes in the face. This entire sequence is considered one of the most brilliant in cinema because of its realism, surprising even today's audiences. To create this scene, special effects makeup artist Rick Baker used prosthetics made from an elastic material that allowed fingers and skin to stretch in real time right in front of the cameras. It was because of these effects that the Academy decided to create the Best Makeup category at the Oscars to award this film. The Roach. In A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Debbie Stevens is introduced as someone confident, focused on physical strength, and determined not to show weakness. But there's an important detail about her that Freddy Krueger loves to exploit in his victims' dreams. Debbie is terrified of insects, especially cockroaches, something that seems small but becomes the perfect fuel inside the nightmare. The scene begins in her house's garage. The environment shifts and turns into an old, decaying gym with cold lighting and rusty equipment. Debbie is working out alone, lifting weights, completely focused, until she starts to feel that something isn't right. Freddy appears in a provocative way, interrupting her workout and mocking her skepticism, as if testing how far her courage really goes. When Debbie tries to react, her body begins to fail. Her arms no longer respond the way they should and take on strange shapes, resembling something that should never exist in a human body. Panic takes over as she tries to escape the space, but the dream is already completely out of control. The transformation happens gradually and disturbingly without any rush, as if Freddy wants her to feel every single second. Debbie runs, slips, and ends up stuck in something sticky on the floor. Realizing too late that she's inside a giant version of a roach trap, her body is no longer the same, reflecting the fear she's always carried. Freddy watches everything from the outside, mocking her, delivering one of his sarcastic lines before ending the nightmare. The True Face. The Witches, 1990, tells the story of Luke, a boy who ends up staying with his grandmother at a luxurious hotel, unaware that the location was chosen for the Witches' annual convention. Hidden inside one of the ballrooms, he watches everything without being seen, believing he's just witnessing a normal conference. The women present seem ordinary at first glance. They're well-dressed, polite, and wear elegant wigs and discreet gloves. But the mood completely shifts when their leader enters the scene. The Grand High Witch, known as Miss Eva Ernst, takes control of the event with an intimidating presence and begins scolding the group for failing their mission to eliminate children around the world. In a moment of absolute authority, she orders the witches to remove their disguises. One by one, the witches take off their wigs, revealing completely bald heads and much more. When the Grand High Witch herself reveals her true face, the impact is even greater. The exaggerated look with a pointed nose, warts, and sharp teeth makes it clear that those creatures had been blending in with ordinary people the whole time. The Fly Man. The Fly from 1986 is not a typical monster story. Seth Brundle is a brilliant and eccentric scientist who develops a teleportation machine. During an apparently successful test, something goes wrong without him realizing it. A fly enters the pod with him, and from that moment on, Seth's body begins a transformation process that unfolds throughout the entire film. At first, everything seems positive. Seth wakes up full of energy, more confident, and physically stronger. He believes the machine improved him, as if he had evolved. This false sense of improvement creates a cruel contrast with what comes next. Small warning signs start to appear. His body no longer reacts the same way, his skin changes texture, and strange details show up without explanation. As time goes on, the transformation becomes impossible to ignore. Parts of his body begin to fail and disappear, while others emerge in the wrong way. Seth tries to stay in control, but his behavior changes as well. He becomes impulsive, aggressive, and starts acting in ways that resemble an insect, slowly losing his empathy and humanity. His appearance reflects this degradation. He looks less and less human, mixing traits of man and fly into something deeply uncomfortable to look at. The climax happens when Seth, desperate, tries to fuse himself with Veronica, his girlfriend, in a last attempt to save himself. The result is a completely deformed creature known as Brundle Fly. Mother and Son. In color. Out of space, the calm life of the Gardner family collapses when a meteorite crashes directly into the yard of their home. The object brings with it an alien presence known only as the Color, a supernatural force that doesn't follow human rules and begins distorting everything around it. Plants grow the wrong way, animals behave aggressively, and little by little, the sanity of the entire family is eroded. Nathan Gardner, the father played by Nicolas Cage, reacts erratically to the Color's influence, but nothing compares to what happens to Teresa and Jack. Teresa is the mother of the family, a woman already dealing with physical pain after cancer. while Jack is the youngest son, a curious child completely vulnerable to what's happening inside the house. The alien presence begins to affect the two of them brutally during a moment of vulnerability, when Teresa tries to take care of her son. Without warning, the color distorts reality and fuses the bodies of mother and son into a single grotesque creature. It's not just a physical merging, but a living abomination. The result is something difficult to comprehend, a creature that still shows fragments of human consciousness, crying, moaning, and trying to move despite constant pain. The transformation is shown in a practical way, without softening the horror. The Teresa Jack creature becomes a deeply disturbing presence inside the house. Devouring House. The House from 1977, directed by Nobuhiko Obayashi, is a film that doesn't play by the usual rules of horror. The story follows a group of students who travel to the isolated house of one of the girls' aunt, named Gorgeous. What starts as an innocent visit quickly turns into a surreal nightmare, where the house itself seems alive and hungry. The place feels strange from the very beginning. Objects move on their own, doors close for no reason, and the tone shifts between something almost childlike and deeply disturbing. Little by little, the house begins to swallow its visitors in absurd and unexpected ways. One of the most memorable moments involves a seemingly harmless piano that turns into a deadly trap. Another character simply disappears after falling into a pool of blood that suddenly opens up on the floor as if the house itself were opening its mouth. Between these events, the film throws in a series of transformations that only work because the movie is fully surreal from the start, making it clear that nothing here needs to make realistic sense. The exaggerated aesthetic, filled with strong colors, simple effects, and frantic editing, creates an almost cartoon-like atmosphere, making the absurd feel normal. One of the boys transforms into a pile of bananas in a scene that is as bizarre as it is funny. In another moment, one of the girls literally turns into a porcelain doll, stiff, fragile, and expressionless, as if she had become part of the house's decoration. The strangest transformation involves Gorgeous. When she puts on her late mother's wedding dress, she begins to take on her mother's traits, blending past, grief, and identity in a completely unexpected way. Human Walrus. In Tusk, the protagonist is Wallace Brighton, a sarcastic podcaster who travels across Canada in search of bizarre stories for his show. That's when he crosses paths with Howard Howe, an old man who seems eccentric at first, but who hides a sick obsession with walruses. Howard wants to turn Wallace into a walrus, driven by guilt and trauma after surviving a shipwreck, thanks to an animal he ended up killing to stay alive. Consumed by this past, he spends years trying to recreate Mr. Tusk in humans, believing that people are naturally cruel and that becoming a walrus is a form of salvation. In the end, his plan is to face Wallace in a deadly fight as a twisted attempt at redemption and revenge. Howard Wallace and begins a completely grotesque surgical process. No magic or possession here. The transformation happens through the scalpel. First, he amputates Wallace's legs and uses the bones from his own tibias to create tusks. Then, he starts reshaping the body. The final blow comes with what he calls the suit. Wallace is literally stitched inside a human skin, creating a creature that disturbingly blends man and animal. The film avoids showing every detail of the surgery, but delivers everything in the scene where the final look is revealed. When Wallace appears fully transformed, it's horrifying to look at. Howard also destroys his mind, forcing Wallace to live like an animal. He's conditioned to swim, eat raw fish, and abandon any trace of humanity. The creature's design was created by Robert Kurtzman using practical effects, and it resembles a bizarre mix of Leatherface and a walrus. The result is one of the most uncomfortable transformations in modern horror. If you made it this far, check out our video on most shocking body discoveries in horror movies. I'm sure you'll like it. See you there.